A letter from the city council signed on to the mayor asking for funding, signed by 14 members of the city council out of 51. Why are my colleagues who are not signed on afraid to sign on to this letter? We need to reach out to all our new city council members to make sure that they sign on to this letter. We cannot afford to wait for another attack against the house of worship.
We're not speaking about people who don't care about the well-being, but we live in extraordinary times. Very, very scary times, frankly, in terms of raising our children, in terms of our own security and well-being. Whether here in the local world, in the local part of the world, or across the four corners of the globe. So when there are extraordinary times, extraordinary steps need to be taken. Our sages teach us that one of the things that we pray for when we pray for our government is that we want them to be strong, because otherwise people will just attack each other. Government's role, as Councilman Yeger pointed out, the first and primary role is to keep its citizenry safe. That's what we're talking about today.
When you walk away today, I want you to think of this young man here. His name is Shmuel. And whether his name is Shmuel, whether his name is Sean, whether his name is Mohammed, it doesn't matter. He deserves the right to be safe when he goes to school, when he goes to the museum, when he goes to a house of worship. All of us who walked into this area today had to go through security. You couldn't get in here unless you walked by an armed person, an armed member of the police. They're here to protect this important institution. Therefore, we also need them to protect other institutions. I asked Councilman Yeger earlier today, how much does this all cost for security? You know what he said to me? Rabbi, what difference does it make what it costs? It costs what it must cost. When you go to save your life, you don't say to the doctor saving you, how much is this going to cost me? You just say, save me. Eric Adams, Borough President of Brooklyn, recently said, you go to a house of prayer to pray, not to be preyed on like anyone else. And you know, these hate mongers, when they walk into a house of worship, they don't ask, is this a conservative synagogue, Orthodox, is this a church, is this a mosque? They hate all of us. And therefore, all of us need to be protected. So you think of this young man and all the other young people. My family came to this country after the war. The first place they went to was a synagogue because they knew sacred space is safe space. Let's make sure that that space is sacred and safe for all of us. Thank you very much.
City Hall has security, has armed guards. When the mayor goes to the gym, he has armed guards. We need armed guards at our houses of worship. Just as the mayor has the protection, we religious New Yorkers need that same protection.
As chair of the Education Committee, the safety and well-being of our children means very much to me, both as a former teacher and now as chair of this critical committee. And as we speak, in the mayor's executive budget, there is not one dime allocated at this time for private schools, which include yeshivas, Catholic schools, and schools for our Muslim brothers and sisters. When after we actually passed the law, Intro 65, championed by my former colleague, Councilman Greenfield, who my colleague, Councilman Yeger, worked with to advance the measure. Not one dime is in this budget right now to protect our children in private schools. We will not advance a budget without those funds to protect our children. I also want to say, as a reminder to our city's leaders, where do you turn to in times of crisis? Where do you turn to, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's a fatal shooting, an act of terror? We see the scenes and images of city leaders and other leaders going into a church or to a synagogue or to a mosque to show solidarity. I want to remind people that in my district, if it was not for churches, synagogues, mosques, we would have lost more life in the response to Superstorm Sandy. So now, during this crisis, a crisis that we're seeing, yes, in synagogues, in churches, which also include black churches that we're seeing shootings and vandalism at, and mosques. They are now turning to us as we have always turned to them. And we must speak with one single voice that we have your back, because you always have ours. Young, old, all of our families, we all gather and pray together, because a community that prays together always stays together. Government is in debt to the power and impact that our houses of worship have to keep our communities united and strong. This is the least that we can do to give back to those who have given us their all. Thank you.